In the Bronze Age, power was stone. It was the Cyclopean walls of Mycenae, the towering fortifications of Troy. A city's strength was measured by the thickness of its ramparts. But on the island of Crete, a different power had taken root. Here, the great towns opened to the sea. Their harbors were wide and welcoming, their streets unblocked by gates. At the great palatial centers of Knossos, Phaistos, Malia, and Zakros, there were no walls for war. This was not naivety. It was a statement of supreme confidence. The Minoans did not need to hide behind stone because their true fortress was the sea itself. For centuries, this strategy held. Their shield was a fleet of swift, oared galleys that commanded the waves. But what happens when your shield shatters? What happens when the very sea you mastered turns against you? 70 miles to the north, a volcano was stirring, preparing an answer that would echo through millennia. At their zenith, between 1700 and 1450 BCE, the Minoan palaces were not just royal homes. They were the engines of a civilization. Walk the corridors of Knossos, as the archaeologist Sir Arthur Evans first did in 1900. You would not find a fortress, but a vibrant, sprawling complex designed for life, not war. A vast central court served as the stage for gatherings and rituals, perhaps even the legendary bull leaping captured in their brilliant frescoes. Light wells, an ingenious architectural invention, plunged daylight deep into the heart of the building. Staircases flowed between levels, connecting workshops, shrines, and living quarters in a layout so complex that it may have inspired the myth of the Labyrinth. The true source of its power lay in the storerooms. Here, Evans found rows of giant clay jars, or pithoi, some as tall as a man. They were the ledgers of a redistributive economy. Grain, olive oil, wine, and honey flowed in from the countryside, were recorded by scribes using a still undeciphered script called Linear A, and then flowed back out to support artisans, priests, and officials. This was a centralized system of immense sophistication, where ritual and bureaucracy were two sides of the same coin. This intricate palace machine was fueled by maritime trade. The later Greek historian Thucydides remembered a king Minos who was the first thalassocrat, the first ruler of a sea empire. Minoan Crete lived this reality. Their unwalled towns were safe because their navy projected power across the Aegean. Their ships suppressed pirates, established outposts on other islands, and controlled the vital sea lanes. They sailed to Egypt, bringing back gold and ivory. They traded with the cities of the Levant for precious materials. They imported copper from Cyprus and tin from distant Anatolia, the essential ingredients for making bronze. In return, Minoan exports were prized across the eastern Mediterranean. Exquisite pottery, fine textiles, and above all, olive oil. In the tombs of Egyptian nobles, paintings depict envoys from the land of Keftiu, almost certainly Crete, bearing gifts of elegant metal vases and other luxuries. This was more than just commerce. It was a web of influence, a network that brought immense wealth and exotic goods to the palace elites, cementing their power. The fleet was their lifeblood, the guarantor of their prosperity and their peace. To the north, across 70 miles of open water, lay the island of Thera, known to us as Santorini. It was home to prosperous towns like Akrotiri, a jewel of the Aegean with paved streets, multi-story houses, and vibrant frescoes that mirrored the style of Minoan Crete. Akrotiri was a key node in the Minoan trading network. But Thera was not a peaceful island. It was a dormant volcano. In the years around 1600 BCE, it began to wake. The earth would have trembled with foreshocks, small quakes that rattled pottery on shelves and unsettled livestock. Perhaps steam began to vent from the mountain's peak. The people of Akrotiri understood the danger. When archaeologists began excavating the town in 1967, they found a Bronze Age Pompeii, perfectly preserved under layers of ash. But they found something else, or rather, something missing: bodies. Unlike Pompeii, there were no skeletons frozen in their final moments. Instead, they found doorways barred, furniture neatly stacked, and valuables removed. The evidence points to an orderly, successful evacuation. The foreshocks gave them warning, and they took it. They packed their most precious belongings, secured their homes, and sailed away before the final cataclysmic eruption. What followed was one of the most violent volcanic eruptions in human history. The heart of the island of Thera blew apart, sending a plume of ash and gas more than 30 kilometers into the stratosphere. The sound of the explosion would have been deafening across the Aegean. Darkness fell as the sky filled with ash. For the Minoans on Crete, the first sign would have been a low, ominous rumble, followed by the sight of that terrifying column of black smoke climbing on the northern horizon. Then came the fallout. Ash began to rain down, a fine, gritty powder that coated everything. In eastern Crete, it formed a layer a few centimeters thick. Not enough to bury towns, but enough to damage crops and contaminate water supplies. But the sky was only half the threat. The collapse of the volcano's caldera displaced a colossal volume of water, triggering a series of massive tsunamis. Waves, perhaps as high as 15 meters, raced south towards Crete's northern coast. They would have struck without warning, a wall of water moving at the speed of a galloping horse. This was the coast where the Minoans had built their open harbors, their naval yards, and their trading depots. The tsunamis were a devastating blow to the heart of Minoan power. A wave 10 meters high does not simply flood, it obliterates. It would have smashed into the port of Knossos at Amnisos and other vital harbors, splintering ships at their moorings and tossing them inland like driftwood. Warehouses full of goods would be gutted, their contents washed out to sea. Skilled sailors and shipwrights would be swept away in moments. The Minoan fleet, their trusted shield, was broken in a single afternoon. At the coastal site of Palikastro in eastern Crete, archaeologists have found the tsunami's fingerprint, a layer of beach sand, marine gravel, and shattered pottery lying directly on top of the floors of Minoan buildings. Even after the waves receded, the sea remained a treacherous enemy. For weeks, perhaps months, vast rafts of floating pumice stone choked the sea lanes. This light, abrasive rock would have made navigation a nightmare, fouling oars, scraping hulls, and blocking harbor entrances. The sea roads that had brought wealth and security were now closed. The unwalled island was suddenly, terrifyingly exposed. The eruption of Thera did not end Minoan civilization overnight. The archaeological record is clear. Life went on. Many sites on Crete show continuity of occupation for several decades after the blast. People began the hard work of rebuilding. They cleared debris, repaired buildings, and replanted their fields. But the system was deeply wounded. The loss of a significant part of the fleet and the disruption of trade routes meant the flow of goods into the palaces slowed to a trickle. The delicate balance of the redistributive economy began to fail. Simultaneously, agriculture suffered a delayed shock. The thin layer of volcanic ash, combined with salt spray from the tsunamis, would have damaged the olive groves and vineyards that were crucial to Crete's export wealth. An olive tree takes years to recover from such stress. The palaces, which guaranteed stability, could no longer deliver the same level of prosperity. For a generation or more, Minoan Crete endured a slow bleeding of wealth, confidence, and power. They were hanging on, but their foundations had been cracked. The final collapse came around 1450 BCE, a full generation or more after the Thera eruption. Across the island, from east to west, a wave of violent destruction swept through nearly every major Minoan town and palace. Archaeologists call this the Late Minoan IB destruction horizon, a stark layer of ash, rubble, and charcoal. At many sites, the fires were so intense they baked the clay administrative tablets hard, preserving them for discovery. Who, or what, brought these final fires? The eruption had weakened the system, but it was not the direct cause of this island-wide catastrophe. An earthquake could have toppled lamps and started fires, but it is unlikely to have caused such uniform destruction everywhere at once. Perhaps, with the central authority of the palaces crumbling, the island descended into internal warfare, with rival factions fighting over dwindling resources. But the most compelling evidence points outwards, to mainland Greece. There, a new power was on the rise, the Mycenaeans. They were warlike, building immense citadels and burying their kings with golden masks and bronze weapons. They were the Minoans' trading partners, rivals, and students. Now, seeing a wounded Crete, its fleet shattered and its economy in turmoil, they may have seen an opportunity too good to ignore. In the ruins of the palace at Knossos, directly above the layer of fiery destruction, the story takes a fascinating turn. The clay tablets change. The old, elegant script of Linear A disappears. In its place, a new, more rigid script appears, Linear B. In the 1950s, this script was famously deciphered and revealed to be an early form of Greek. This was the language of the Mycenaeans. The new masters of Knossos were not Minoan. They were Greek-speaking administrators, inventorying their new domain. The tablets list chariots, armor, weapons, and men, the concerns of a military occupation. A Mycenaean elite had stepped into the power vacuum. They did not destroy Knossos completely. They took it over, adapting the sophisticated Minoan administrative machine for their own purposes. They became the new palace lords, ruling over the local Cretan population. The great unwalled civilization, once master of the seas, had fallen under the control of the mainland fortress builders. The collapse was not an ending, but a hostile takeover. What remains of this lost world? We can still walk through the sunlit courts of Knossos and marvel at the ambition of its builders. The great storerooms stand silent, their giant pithoi still in place. We can see the frescoes, their colors still electric after 3.5 millennia. The leaping dolphins, the graceful ladies in blue, the iconic bull leapers, forever suspended in their dangerous, elegant dance. At Akrotiri, we have an entire city, a moment in time sealed away by the volcano that triggered the long decline. And on the shores of Palacastro, geologists can still point to that thin, pale layer of sand in the earth, the physical trace of the wave that broke the Minoan shield. The story of Minoan collapse is a cautionary tale. It shows how even the most sophisticated society can be brought low by a combination of natural disaster and human opportunism. Their empire trusted the sea, and for centuries that trust was rewarded. But the sea is a fickle protector. When the mountain of fire turned their greatest strength into their greatest vulnerability, the unwalled kingdom could not stand. The Minoans did not vanish. Their culture was absorbed, their myths repurposed, and their island home became a prize for others. What remains is a warning wrapped in beauty, a reminder that the foundations of any power, no matter how permanent they seem, can be cracked by forces beyond control. If stories of ancient rises and falls pull you in, this is the channel for you. Subscribe and leave a like if you enjoyed this walk through Bronze Age Crete. There are more empires, more palaces, and more endings waiting to be explored. Until next time, keep your eye on the horizon.